Margaret Hayes was 68 years old when her daughter-in-law decided she should start paying rent to live in the very house she had spent decades building. It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning in Portland, Maine. Margaret walked into the kitchen expecting the comforting smell of coffee, but instead she was hit with the sharp scent of lemon disinfectant. Her old coffee machine, the same one she had used every morning for nearly 10 years, was gone. In its place sat a sleek silver espresso machine with glowing buttons she didn't understand. Her daughter-in-law, Vanessa, sat at the counter scrolling through her tablet as if she owned the world. Across from her, Margaret's son, Ethan, stared silently at his phone. "Margaret," Vanessa began coolly, not bothering to look up, "we've been reviewing expenses. Since my mother's medical bills have increased, we need everyone in the house contributing fairly. Starting next month, we'll need you to pay $900 a month for your room." Margaret blinked once. Her room? This was the same home she and her late husband Daniel had bought 40 years earlier, the same kitchen where she had packed Ethan's school lunches, the same dining table Daniel had handcrafted by hand before arthritis ruined his fingers. Years ago, Margaret had transferred ownership of the house into Ethan's name to simplify inheritance matters after her husband passed away. She trusted her son completely. Vanessa folded her hands. "Technically, Ethan owns the property now. We're carrying the financial responsibility." Margaret slowly looked toward her son. He never lifted his eyes. That hurt more than the words themselves. But instead of arguing, something inside her suddenly became very calm, crystal clear. "All right," she said quietly. Then she stood up, walked back to her bedroom, and began packing, not out of anger, out of awakening. By Wednesday morning, Vanessa was already acting triumphant. She handed Margaret a grocery list without offering money. "Make sure the kids' snacks are organic this time," she said casually. Margaret took the paper politely. Then she went to the store and bought only a few things for herself: fresh bread, butter, soup, tea, and a small bag of premium coffee. Nothing else. That afternoon, she sat at her desk reviewing years of financial records. Though Ethan and Vanessa behaved like homeowners, Margaret had still been quietly paying almost everything behind the scenes: property taxes, insurance premiums, furnace servicing, internet, water bills, and heating fuel. Ethan always claimed he was investing for the future. Vanessa spent money like there was no tomorrow. Margaret picked up the phone. First, she canceled the automatic heating oil payments tied to her bank account. Then she contacted the insurance company and informed them she would no longer be covering the homeowner's policy. By evening, she had arranged movers and confirmed availability at a small condo she owned near Lake Champlain in Vermont. She had originally purchased it years earlier as a retirement investment. Now it would become her escape. The following morning, Vanessa walked downstairs expecting breakfast waiting on the table. Instead, the kitchen was spotless and silent. Margaret sat peacefully near the window reading the newspaper. Vanessa frowned. "Where's breakfast?" Margaret lowered the paper slightly. "I assumed since I'm now considered a tenant, household services were no longer included." Vanessa stared at her in disbelief. A few minutes later, Ethan rushed downstairs in wrinkled clothes. "Mom, did you iron my work shirts?" "No," Margaret answered calmly. "I imagine the dry cleaner downtown could help." Vanessa slammed a cabinet shut. "We're not charging you rent so you can sit around doing nothing." Margaret smiled politely. "And tenants don't provide unpaid labor." The silence afterward was icy. That same afternoon, the furnace repair technician arrived for the annual inspection. After checking the system, he sighed heavily. "The boiler's in rough shape," he explained. "Repairs will run close to $600. Normally, Margaret would have handled it immediately. Instead, she folded her hands. "You'll need to discuss that with Ethan. He owns the house now. I'm simply renting a room." The shouting upstairs started less than 5 minutes later. Margaret continued reading her book. For the first time in years, she felt strangely peaceful. By Friday, the atmosphere inside the house had become unbearable. Vanessa's mother came over for wine on the patio that evening. "Margaret," Vanessa called through the screen door, "can you bring out that baked brie everyone likes?" Margaret stepped outside empty-handed. "I didn't make any today. she replied pleasantly, and I packed away my wine collection for the move. Vanessa nearly exploded. What is wrong with you lately? You've become unbelievably selfish. Margaret looked at her steadily. No, Vanessa, I've simply stopped being useful to people who mistake kindness for obligation. Then she walked back inside. Sunday night was Margaret's final evening there. She packed the last of her belongings into plain cardboard boxes, labeled donations so nobody would pay attention. Family photo albums, antique silverware, Daniel's treasured first edition novels. The soul of the home quietly disappeared box by box. Before bed, Margaret left a single sheet of paper on the kitchen island, listing utility contacts, trash pickup days, and maintenance reminders. At the bottom, she wrote, October rent has been deducted from the thousands I already paid toward household expenses. We are even. Monday morning at sunrise, the movers arrived. Within 45 minutes, Margaret's furniture and belongings were gone. She left behind her house key and cancellation notices for the internet, and utilities still under her name. Then she got into her SUV and drove north. The farther she traveled, the lighter she felt. By noon, she reached her condo overlooking the lake. The autumn air smelled clean and cold. Inside, the rooms were warm and quiet. For the first time in years, there were no demands waiting for her. Then her phone exploded. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. Where are you? The Wi-Fi stopped working. The heat isn't turning on. Why would you do this to us? Margaret calmly sipped her tea before replying with one message. You are homeowners now. The responsibilities belong to you. Then she silenced her phone. Over the next several weeks, reality hit Ethan and Vanessa hard. The heating oil tank ran dry during the first cold snap. Their insurance had lapsed. Their finances collapsed almost immediately because they had depended entirely on Margaret covering the gaps without ever realizing it. Eventually, Vanessa left. 3 months later, Ethan sold the house because he could no longer afford it. Not long afterward, the marriage ended too. One snowy afternoon, Ethan visited Margaret at the lake. He looked older, humbler. He handed her flowers and quietly said, I didn't understand how much you carried for us. Margaret simply nodded, because sometimes love isn't rescuing people from consequences. Sometimes love is finally stepping aside so they can face them. That evening, Margaret sat by the fireplace watching snow fall across the frozen water outside her window. Her small condo was peaceful, warm, quiet, and entirely hers. For the first time in decades, Margaret Hayes wasn't someone's wallet, maid, or safety net. She was finally just herself, and freedom, she realized, tasted far better than any expensive coffee pod ever could.